The air was thick with the hum of alien machinery as Corporal Ethan Raines stood at the edge of the observation deck, his boots planted firmly on the metallic flooring that vibrated faintly beneath him. The view before him wasn't one of Earth's familiar blue skies or sprawling cities. Instead, it stretched across an expanse of violet clouds and 3 suns that painted the horizon in hues humans had never seen back home. This was Itherian 7, a planet so far from Earth that even light took decades to make the journey, and where humanity's first contact with an advanced alien civilization had transformed everything they thought they knew about the universe. Ethan adjusted the collar of his standard-issue combat uniform, the fabric feeling strangely restrictive against his skin despite months of wearing it in this foreign environment. His reflection stared back at him through the transparent alloy window, showing a face weathered by both battle and time. The lines around his eyes told stories of sleepless nights spent strategizing against unknown threats, while the slight tremor in his hands spoke of countless close encounters with death. Yet, what truly defined him now wasn't his military rank or combat experience. It was the unspoken connection he'd formed with someone who shouldn't have existed in his world at all. In the distance, beyond the shimmering force fields that separated the human compound from the native structures of Itherian 7, he could see the crystalline towers of the royal palace rising like frozen waterfalls against the alien sky. It was there, within those prismatic walls, that she resided, Princess Althea of the Itherian people. Her presence had haunted his thoughts since their first meeting 6 months ago during diplomatic negotiations. She wasn't just beautiful in the conventional sense, though her ethereal features, with skin that seemed to capture starlight and eyes that shifted between shades of aquamarine and amethyst, certainly commanded attention. No, it was something deeper that drew him to her, the way she carried herself with a grace that transcended physical movement, how her laughter seemed to ripple through the air like musical notes, and most importantly, the genuine curiosity she showed toward humanity despite centuries of isolation between their species. Their interactions had been strictly professional at first, confined to formal meetings and cultural exchange sessions. But over time, chance encounters in the neutral zones between their territories had become more frequent. They would discuss everything from quantum physics to poetry, finding common ground in their shared appreciation for knowledge and beauty. Each conversation left Ethan feeling simultaneously more connected to her and more aware of the vast chasm between their worlds. The weight of protocol pressed heavily on his shoulders, reminding him that he was merely a soldier among diplomats, while she was royalty of a civilization far older and more advanced than Earth's. Tonight, however, felt different. As he stood there watching the alien constellations emerge in the darkening sky, Ethan realized that he couldn't continue ignoring the growing feelings within him. The risk was enormous, not just for his career, but potentially for diplomatic relations between their species. Yet, the thought of never knowing whether she might feel the same way seemed infinitely worse. He had rehearsed this moment in his mind countless times, each scenario ending with different outcomes ranging from acceptance to rejection to catastrophic diplomatic fallout. Now, standing on the precipice of actually following through with his intentions, doubt threatened to overwhelm him. His hand instinctively moved to the communicator on his wrist, but he stopped himself. This wasn't something that could be conveyed through official channels or delegated to superiors. If he were to do this, it had to be personal, direct, and from the heart. Taking a deep breath that carried the faint scent of Itherian's unique atmosphere, a mixture of ozone and something floral yet metallic, Ethan made his decision. He would approach her chambers directly, protocol be damned. The worst she could do was refuse him, and if that happened, at least he would know he had tried. As he walked through the sterile corridors of the human compound, passing fellow soldiers who gave him curious glances, Ethan felt every step echoing through his entire being. The gravity of what he was about to attempt wasn't lost on him. He was about to breach centuries of interstellar diplomacy with nothing more than hope and determination. Yet, somewhere deep inside, he believed that true connections transcended species, politics, and even cosmic distances. All he needed was courage enough to take that final step into the unknown. The crystalline doors of the royal chambers parted with a soft chime that resonated like wind chimes caught in a gentle breeze. Ethan found himself stepping into a space that defied human architectural understanding. Walls that seemed to breathe with shifting colors, floors that pulsed faintly underfoot, and air that carried the subtle fragrance of blooming flowers from 1,000 light-years away. At the center of this alien elegance stood Princess Althea, her form appearing almost too perfect to be real. She turned slowly, her movements fluid like liquid mercury, and for a moment, time seemed to freeze as their eyes met. Corporal Rain. Her voice rippled through the chamber. carrying undertones that no human language could fully capture. "Your presence here is unexpected." Her words weren't harsh, but rather carried a musical quality that made even simple statements sound like poetry. The bioluminescent patterns that danced across her skin shifted subtly, betraying her curiosity despite her composed exterior. Ethan swallowed hard, feeling suddenly inadequate in his utilitarian military uniform amidst such otherworldly splendor. "Your Highness," he began, his voice steadier than he expected, "I apologize for intruding without prior arrangement. He paused, searching for words that wouldn't diminish the significance of what he was about to say. The princess tilted her head slightly, her multifaceted eyes seeming to peer directly into his soul. "I've come to realize that our encounters these past months have meant more to me than mere diplomatic exchanges," he continued, taking a cautious step forward. "I find myself thinking about our conversations long after they've ended, revisiting your insights on everything from astrophysics to Zytherian art forms." He gestured vaguely toward the intricate crystalline sculptures that adorned the chamber, their facets catching and bending the light from the trisolar system outside. Althea's expression remained enigmatic, though the bioluminescent patterns on her cheeks brightened momentarily. "You speak of connection, Corporal, yet you must understand the complexities involved. Our species are separated not just by light years, but by centuries of independent evolution." Her words carried no judgment, only a gentle reminder of the vast gulf between them. "That's precisely why this feels so significant," Ethan pressed on, his confidence growing despite the surreal nature of the situation. "We've both fought to maintain peace between our peoples, but what if there's potential for something more? Something that could bridge our differences in ways diplomacy alone cannot." He reached into his pocket, pulling out a small device that projected a holographic image of Earth's night sky, complete with constellations that held meaning for both their cultures. The princess approached the floating stars, her fingers tracing patterns in the air that caused the projections to dance and shift. "Your species has much to learn about subtlety, Corporal," she said, a hint of amusement coloring her tone. "Yet your directness is refreshing. Most of my court would have spent weeks crafting elaborate metaphors to convey what you've expressed in mere minutes." Ethan felt his heart pounding against his ribcage as she turned back to face him. Would you consider allowing me to show you more of what makes us human?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "Not as a diplomat, not as a soldier, but simply as someone who believes we can find common ground beyond our assigned roles." For several long moments, Althea studied him, her gaze penetrating deeper than any scanning technology he'd ever encountered. The silence stretched taut between them, filled only by the gentle hum of the chamber's environmental systems. Then, to his surprise, her lips curved into a smile that seemed to illuminate the entire room. "You humans are indeed fascinating creatures," she mused. "So prone to acting on impulse, yet capable of such profound reflection when given the opportunity." She drifted closer, her movements creating subtle distortions in the air like heat waves rising from desert sands. "Very well, Corporal Rain. I accept your invitation, though I must warn you, Zytherian courtship rituals are considerably more complex than your straightforward approach." Her eyes sparkled with an emotion Ethan couldn't quite place, perhaps amusement mixed with genuine interest. Before he could respond, she raised a slender hand, and the chamber's lighting shifted, casting everything in a soft, golden glow. "But first, you must understand that our traditions demand certain protocols. Shall we begin with a demonstration of mutual trust?" Without waiting for his response, she extended her hand, palm up, revealing delicate patterns that seemed to pulse with inner light. Ethan hesitated only briefly before placing his hand in hers. The moment their skin touched, a surge of sensations coursed through him. Not unpleasant, but overwhelming in their intensity. Images flashed before his eyes, ancient Zytherian ceremonies, star formations from perspectives impossible for humans to achieve, and glimpses of what might have been memories of Althea's youth. Through it all, he felt her presence, not as separate, but somehow intertwined with his own consciousness. "This is but a fraction of what awaits us," Althea whispered, her voice resonating directly in his mind as well as his ears. "Are you prepared to navigate these waters, Corporal? To dive deep into mysteries that might challenge everything you believe about reality itself?" Her grip tightened slightly, not in threat, but in what felt like an offering of support. "I'm ready," Ethan replied, surprising himself with the conviction in his voice. "Whatever challenges lie ahead, I'd rather face them with you than continue existing in ignorance of what could be." The words felt inadequate compared to the depth of what he was experiencing, yet they seemed to satisfy something fundamental in the princess's demeanor. Althea released his hand, and the visions gradually faded, leaving behind only the memory of their connection. "Then let us proceed," she said, her tone carrying both promise and warning. "But know this, Corporal Rain, once begun, this path cannot be easily abandoned. The consequences of our actions may ripple through both our species in ways neither of us can fully predict." As she led him deeper into the crystalline structure of her chambers, Ethan realized that his simple request had opened doors to possibilities far beyond what he'd imagined. The air grew thicker with anticipation, charged with the electricity of two vastly different worlds colliding in a single moment of mutual curiosity and desire. Around them, the chamber's crystals began to sing, producing harmonies that seemed to resonate with the very fabric of space-time itself. "Observe carefully," Althea instructed, her movements becoming more deliberate as they approached a central platform where strands of light wove intricate patterns in the air. "What you perceive as courtship among your kind is but a shadow of what we Zytherians experience. Our bonds are forged not just through words or gestures, but through shared resonance with the fundamental forces of existence." She gestured toward the light patterns, which began to coalesce into shapes that defied human geometry. "These represent the threads of connection that bind all things. To pursue a relationship with me is to willingly entangle yourself in these threads, to become part of a tapestry that spans dimensions beyond your current comprehension." Her eyes met his with an intensity that made his breath catch in his throat. Ethan watched as the light patterns responded to their proximity, swirling faster and changing colors in response to their combined presence. "I understand the risks," he said, though his voice betrayed a hint of uncertainty. "But isn't that what exploration is all about? Pushing beyond what's comfortable or familiar." He reached out tentatively toward the nearest strand of light, feeling its warmth against his fingertips. "Indeed," Althea acknowledged, moving to stand beside him. "But you must also understand that this is not a game or a casual experiment. Among my people, such connections are sacred and carry responsibilities that transcend individual desires." She placed her hand atop his, causing the light to flare brighter and reveal hidden depths within its glow. "To proceed would mean accepting that you will forever be changed, that parts of you will become something else entirely." The realization hit Ethan with the force of a revelation. This wasn't just about asking a princess out on a date, it was about fundamentally altering his existence. The strands of light seemed to pulse in rhythm with his heartbeat, drawing him deeper into their mystery. He thought about all the training he'd undergone, all the battles he'd fought, and realized that none of it had prepared him for this moment of profound choice. "You mentioned consequences earlier," he said, turning to face her. "What exactly would happen if we pursued this connection? How would it affect relations between our species?" The question hung in the air, heavy with implications that neither of them could fully grasp. Althea's expression softened, though her eyes remained intense. "That is the crux of our dilemma, isn't it? For better or worse, our actions would set a precedent. Some among my people would see this as a betrayal of tradition, while others might view it as the natural evolution of our species' interaction with yours." She paused, allowing the weight of her words to settle between them. "And then there's the matter of biological compatibility, which extends far beyond mere physical attraction." She guided him toward a viewing portal that displayed the vast expanse of Zytherian 7's surface below. "Our physiology is attuned to different frequencies of reality. What you perceive as solid matter is, to us, but one layer of existence among many. To truly connect with me would require you to expand your awareness beyond your current limitations." The landscape outside seemed to shimmer and shift as she spoke, revealing hidden dimensions that made Ethan's head spin with vertigo. "But perhaps the greatest challenge lies in understanding that love, as you humans define it, is but a single note in a symphony of possible connections," she continued. "We Zytherians experience relationships through multiple layers of consciousness simultaneously. The emotional, the intellectual, the spiritual, all exist independently yet interconnected, creating harmonies that can be both beautiful and overwhelming." Ethan felt the enormity of what she was saying settle upon him like a mantle of stars. The light patterns continued their dance around them, responding to their presence with increasing complexity. He understood now why she had warned him about the complexity of Zytherian courtship. This was about rewiring his very perception of reality, about stepping into a realm where human concepts of love and connection were but crude approximations of something far more profound. As they stood there, surrounded by dancing lights and shifting realities, Ethan realized that his simple request had evolved into something far greater than he'd anticipated. The decision before him was no longer just about pursuing a relationship with a beautiful alien princess. It was about embracing an entirely new paradigm of existence, one that would forever alter his understanding of himself and his place in the universe. The chamber's atmosphere seemed to thicken with anticipation as Althea led Ethan to a crystalline table that floated effortlessly in the center of the room. Upon its surface, intricate patterns emerged, pulsing with a rhythm that seemed to synchronize with their breathing. "Before we proceed further," she explained, her voice carrying an unusual gravity, "we must address the immediate concerns that such a union would raise among both our peoples." She gestured toward the table, and holographic projections sprang to life, displaying complex diagrams of both human and Zytherian social structures. "Your military hierarchy, Corporal, operates on principles of chain of command and clear authority lines. My position as princess carries responsibilities that extend beyond personal desires to encompass the stability of our entire civilization." The projections shifted, showing overlapping spheres of influence between their respective societies. Ethan watched as the visual representations revealed potential points of conflict. "You're saying that even if we wanted to pursue this, there are structural obstacles that could prevent it?" He ran his fingers through his hair, suddenly aware of how limited his understanding of interstellar diplomacy really was. The patterns on the table responded to his anxiety, shifting into chaotic fractals before stabilizing again. "Precisely," Althea confirmed, her bioluminescent markings dimming slightly. "Your commanding officers would view this as a potential security risk, while my council would see it as a threat to our cultural purity. Yet—" She paused, touching a particular node in the holographic display, causing it to bloom into a cascade of possibilities. "There exists a precedent in our history, a treaty of mutual growth that allows for exceptional circumstances to override traditional restrictions." Her fingers traced a glowing pathway through the projection, highlighting ancient symbols that Ethan recognized from previous diplomatic documents. "The Harmonic Accord," she explained, was designed to facilitate unprecedented cooperation between species. While primarily intended for technological and scientific exchange, it contains clauses that could accommodate unconventional alliances. The way she emphasized the last word sent a shiver down Ethan's spine. "But activating such clauses would require more than just our agreement," she continued, her expression becoming increasingly serious. "It would necessitate presenting our case to both the Human Diplomatic Corps and the Zytherian Ascension Council. The process could take cycles of your Earth years, during which time our relationship would need to remain completely secret." The chamber's lighting dimmed slightly, emphasizing the gravity of her words. Ethan felt the weight of responsibility settling heavily upon his shoulders. "And if we were discovered before the process was complete?" he asked, already dreading the answer. The thought of jeopardizing years of careful diplomatic work between their species was almost paralyzing. "The consequences would be severe," Althea admitted, her voice dropping to a near whisper. "Your military career would be terminated, likely followed by immediate repatriation to Earth. As for me—" She turned away briefly, her normally fluid movements momentarily stiff. "The penalty for a royal princess engaging in unauthorized interspecies relations is exile. Permanent separation from my people and my throne." The revelation struck Ethan like a physical blow. He had known there would be risks, but the magnitude of what they were considering had just become terrifyingly clear. The light patterns on the table seemed to darken in response to the tension in the air. "Is it worth it?" he asked, though he wasn't sure whether he was addressing her or himself. "All this complexity, all these dangers. Is it worth risking everything for something that might not even be possible?" Althea returned to his side, her presence bringing a measure of calm to the turbulent emotions swirling within him. "That is the question we must both answer honestly," she said, her eyes reflecting the multi-hued light of the chamber. "For my part, I find myself drawn to the possibility of exploring connection beyond our established boundaries. Your directness, your willingness to embrace the unknown, These qualities resonate with aspects of our culture that have lain dormant for generations. She touched a control on the table, and the projections dissolved into a single, pulsing orb of light. However, we must also consider the practical implications. Your biology is incompatible with ours in ways that go beyond mere physical differences. Our lifespans, our metabolic processes, even our neural pathways operate on fundamentally different principles. Bridging these gaps would require medical and technological interventions that neither of our species has attempted before. The orb of light expanded, filling the chamber with a soft glow that seemed to vibrate at a frequency just beyond human hearing. And then there's the matter of public perception, Althea added. While some among both our peoples might view our union as a symbol of hope and progress, others would see it as a violation of everything we hold sacred. The political ramifications would be unpredictable, to say the least. Ethan watched as smaller orbs began to orbit the central light, each representing different factions and interest groups within their respective societies. Some glowed warmly, suggesting potential allies, while others pulsed with ominous red hues, indicating significant opposition. "It's like we're trying to forge a new star from colliding galaxies," he murmured, overwhelmed by the complexity of factors at play. "An apt metaphor," Althea agreed. "And like such cosmic events, the outcome could either be catastrophic or breathtakingly beautiful." She reached out, her fingers brushing against the light orb, causing it to emit a series of harmonic tones that resonated through the chamber. The choice before us is not just about personal fulfillment or even species-level cooperation. It's about challenging the very foundations of what we believe possible in terms of interspecies relationships. As they stood there, surrounded by visual representations of their species' interconnected futures, Ethan realized that this decision would affect far more than just their personal lives. Every choice they made from this point forward would ripple through both their civilizations, potentially reshaping the course of interstellar relations for generations to come. The weight of this realization settled between them, heavier than any physical burden either had ever carried. The chamber's crystalline walls began to transform, their surfaces shifting from smooth planes to intricate lattices that seemed to breathe with their combined presence. Althea stepped closer to Ethan, her movements creating subtle disturbances in the air that caused the light patterns to swirl around them like living entities. "We stand at a crossroads," she said, her voice carrying an unusual blend of vulnerability and strength. "Between duty and desire, between tradition and innovation, between two worlds that have only just begun to understand each other." She raised her hand, and the chamber's lighting shifted to a spectrum that neither human nor Zytherian eyes had evolved to naturally perceive. "Do you feel it, Corporal?" she asked, her fingers tracing invisible patterns in the air between them. "The resonance building between us? It's not just attraction or curiosity. It's something more primal, more fundamental. A recognition that transcends species boundaries." Ethan's breath caught as he watched the light patterns respond to their proximity, intertwining in ways that seemed to defy natural laws. "I do feel it," he admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. "But it's not just about what I feel, is it? There's something larger at play here, something that wants us to connect, despite all the obstacles." He reached out tentatively, his fingers brushing against one of the swirling light streams, feeling a warmth that seemed to penetrate deeper than just his skin. Althea nodded, her bioluminescent markings pulsing in sync with the chamber's transformations. "Our species have evolved separately for millennia, developing along paths that should have kept us forever apart. Yet here we are, drawn together by forces we barely understand. Do you think this is mere coincidence?" Her question hung in the air, heavy with implications that neither of them could fully articulate. "I don't believe in coincidences anymore," Ethan replied, his eyes locked with hers. "Not after everything we've learned about quantum entanglement, about how particles can remain connected across vast distances. Maybe this is the universe's way of pushing us toward a new understanding." He took a step closer, feeling the air between them charged with possibilities that went beyond anything he'd experienced before. The princess's expression softened, though her eyes remained intense. "You humans have a saying about stars aligning, don't you? About cosmic events conspiring to create moments of perfect harmony." She gestured toward the viewing portal, where the three suns of Zytherian 7 were beginning to converge in an astronomical event that occurred only once every few centuries. "Perhaps that's what this is. A celestial alignment that echoes something deeper, something fundamental about the nature of connection itself. As they watched, the converging suns cast their chamber in a kaleidoscope of colors that seemed to bring the very fabric of reality into sharper focus. Ethan felt his perceptions shifting, as if the barriers between himself and the universe were dissolving. "If we choose to move forward," he said slowly, "it won't just be about us anymore. We'd be representatives of something bigger, pioneers in a new kind of relationship that could redefine what it means for different species to connect." Althea's hand found his, and this time the contact produced visible ripples in the air around them. "Exactly," she whispered. "This isn't just about love or attraction as either of our species understands it. It's about creating a new paradigm of existence, one where differences aren't barriers but bridges, where the sum becomes greater than its parts." The light patterns swirled faster, responding to the intensity of their connection. "But to achieve that," Ethan continued, feeling the weight of their shared destiny settling upon him, "we'll need to be more than just willing participants. We'll have to become architects of change, navigators charting courses through unexplored dimensions of consciousness and existence." He looked into her eyes, seeing reflected there not just the present moment but the vast potential of what could be. "We'll need to teach each other," Althea added, her voice carrying both excitement and trepidation. "Not just about our respective cultures or physiologies, but about how to perceive reality differently. You'll need to learn to see the threads of connection that bind all things, while I must understand the value of your linear perspective on time and relationships." The chamber's crystalline structures began to hum in harmony with their voices, creating a symphony of sound and light that seemed to emanate from the very fabric of space-time itself. As they stood there, suspended between worlds and possibilities, Ethan realized that their connection represented something far greater than either of them had initially comprehended. It wasn't just about bridging the gap between human and Zytherian. It was about forging a new path in the evolution of consciousness itself. The light patterns around them intensified, forming shapes and symbols that neither of them had seen before, yet somehow felt intimately familiar. "We're not just choosing each other," Althea said finally, her voice resonating with newfound clarity. "We're choosing to participate in something that could change the fundamental nature of interspecies relationships across the galaxy. The question is—" She paused, looking deeply into his eyes. "Are we ready to become more than we are? To evolve beyond our current limitations and help guide both our species toward a future we can barely imagine?" The chamber seemed to hold its breath, the air thick with potential and purpose. Outside, the converging suns reached their peak alignment, bathing everything in a light that seemed to originate from somewhere beyond normal spacetime. In that moment, Ethan understood that their decision would ripple through dimensions and timelines, affecting not just their immediate future but the very fabric of what was possible between species across the cosmos. The chamber's transformation accelerated, the crystalline walls now pulsing with a rhythm that matched their synchronized heartbeats. Althea stepped back slightly, her movements deliberate and measured, as if choreographing an ancient ritual. "There's one final aspect we must address," she said, her voice carrying a weight that made Ethan's chest tighten. "The temporal implications of our potential union." She waved her hand, and the chamber's projections shifted to display complex temporal equations that seemed to dance across the walls like living hieroglyphs. Ethan watched as the equations resolved into visual representations of branching timelines, each path glowing with different intensities and colors. "Your concept of linear time is but a single thread in a vast tapestry," Althea explained. "Our connection would necessarily involve navigating multiple temporal streams simultaneously. Can you comprehend what that means?" She touched one of the projections, causing it to expand into a detailed visualization of intersecting probability waves. The sheer complexity of what she was showing him made Ethan's head spin. "You're saying that pursuing this relationship would affect not just our present, but multiple possible futures?" He reached out instinctively to steady himself against the crystalline table, only to find his hand passing through its surface as if it were made of liquid light. The sensation sent shockwaves through his nervous system, triggering flashes of images that might have been memories from futures yet to come. "More than that," Althea continued, her voice modulating through octaves that resonated in his bones. "Each moment we spend together creates new branches in the temporal lattice. Some lead to harmony and growth, while others—" She trailed off, allowing the visualizations to show dark, twisted paths that seemed to consume themselves in paradoxical loops. The danger lies not just in choosing the wrong path, but in becoming trapped between conflicting timelines. Ethan focused on maintaining his composure as the chamber's temperature seemed to fluctuate wildly, responding to the intensity of their discussion. "How do we even begin to navigate something like this?" he asked, his voice trembling despite his best efforts to remain steady. "Humans aren't equipped to handle this level of temporal complexity." He watched as his own reflection in the crystalline walls fragmented into multiple versions of himself, each representing a different potential outcome of their decision. "We would need to develop new cognitive frameworks," Althea explained, her form momentarily blurring as if existing in multiple places at once. "Your brain would need to adapt to processing information across multiple temporal dimensions simultaneously. The initial stages would be disorienting, to say the least." She demonstrated by causing several of the timeline projections to merge and split, creating patterns that made Ethan's vision blur at the edges. "But the rewards," she continued, her voice carrying a note of wonder that transcended species boundaries. "Imagine experiencing moments not just sequentially, but holistically. Feeling the full weight of cause and effect simultaneously, understanding the consequences of actions before they're taken. It would be like awakening from a dream to find reality far more complex and beautiful than previously imagined." The chamber's lighting shifted to reflect this new perspective, creating patterns that seemed to fold space itself into impossible geometries. Ethan felt his consciousness expanding, reaching out toward these new possibilities even as his rational mind screamed warnings about the dangers of tampering with time. "And if we fail?" he asked, though the question felt inadequate to encompass the magnitude of what they were discussing. "If we get lost in the temporal currents or create paradoxes that threaten both our species?" Althea's expression became grave, her normally fluid movements momentarily rigid. "The temporal safeguards built into our civilization's core technologies would activate," she explained. "Both our consciousnesses would be isolated in a temporal bubble, cut off from our respective timelines until the anomalies could be resolved. For you, this would mean existing in a state of suspended animation, while for me—" She paused, her bioluminescent patterns dimming significantly. "It would be akin to death, though not in a way your species could fully comprehend." The chamber's atmosphere grew heavier, charged with the weight of their potential choices. "Yet despite these risks," Althea continued, her voice regaining strength, "the opportunity to pioneer this new form of interspecies connection is unprecedented. We could establish protocols for temporal navigation that would benefit countless other species throughout the galaxy." She touched another control, and the projections revealed potential applications of their research, advancements in medicine, technology, and understanding of consciousness that could revolutionize both their civilizations. As they stood there, surrounded by visual representations of infinite possibilities, Ethan realized that their decision carried implications far beyond personal happiness or even species-level cooperation. They were contemplating nothing less than the evolution of temporal awareness itself, a step forward in consciousness that could redefine what it meant to exist in the universe. The chamber's crystalline structures began to sing, producing harmonies that seemed to resonate through time itself, connecting past, present, and future in ways that defied conventional understanding. The convergence of Zytherian 7's three suns reached its zenith, bathing the chamber in a spectrum of light that no human instrument could accurately measure. Ethan felt his perception stretching beyond its normal limits, as if the very fabric of reality was thinning around them. Althea's presence seemed to expand, her form becoming both more substantial and more ethereal simultaneously. "We've reached the threshold," she whispered, her voice carrying through multiple dimensions at once. "The moment where theory becomes practice, where potential transforms into actuality." She extended both hands, palms facing upward, and the chamber's crystalline floor responded by rising to meet them, forming a platform that seemed to float between worlds. "Step forward," she invited, though the word carried more weight than a simple request. "Not just physically, but mentally and temporally. Feel the threads of possibility wrapping around you, pulling you toward futures that haven't yet been written." The air between them crackled with energy, creating visible waves that distorted the surrounding space-time continuum. Ethan took the first step onto the floating platform, immediately feeling the shift in gravitational constants and temporal flow. His senses expanded, taking in information from directions that shouldn't exist in three-dimensional space. The light patterns around them began to organize into complex mathematical sequences that his mind struggled to process, yet somehow understood on an instinctual level. "This is what you meant by experiencing multiple dimensions simultaneously," he managed to say, though his voice sounded distant even to his own ears. "Exactly," Althea confirmed, joining him on the platform. As their feet touched the same surface, the chamber's energy signature changed dramatically. The crystalline walls became transparent, revealing not just the alien landscape outside, but glimpses of other realities. Parallel versions of themselves making different choices, existing in timelines that branched off from this precise moment. "Each step forward creates new possibilities," she explained, her form occasionally flickering between multiple states of being. "Some lead to harmony, others to chaos. The trick is learning to navigate without becoming lost in the infinite variations." The platform began to rotate, aligning itself with cosmic currents that Ethan could now perceive as tangible forces. "Focus on the resonance between us," Althea instructed, her voice modulating through frequencies that triggered responses in parts of his brain he hadn't known existed. "Feel how our energies complement each other, how your linear perspective balances my multidimensional awareness. This is the key to maintaining coherence across temporal boundaries." As they stood there, suspended between worlds and possibilities, Ethan realized that their connection represented something far more profound than either of them had initially comprehended. The light patterns around them intensified, forming symbols and equations that seemed to rewrite themselves continuously, reflecting the dynamic nature of their evolving relationship. "It's like we're creating a new language," he observed, watching as the patterns responded to their combined presence. "A way of communicating that transcends both our species' traditional methods." "More than that," Althea corrected, her form momentarily resolving into perfect clarity. "We're establishing protocols for interspecies interaction that could serve as a template for countless other civilizations throughout the galaxy. The temporal awareness we're developing could become the foundation for a new era of cooperation and understanding." The chamber's energy field surged, creating visible distortions in the fabric of spacetime that rippled outward like waves on a cosmic sea. The platform and the chamber responded by stabilizing into a new configuration. The swirling patterns of light coalesced into a single, radiant orb that hovered between them, pulsing with a rhythm that seemed to synchronize with their heartbeats. "This is our anchor," she explained, her voice soft but firm. "A focal point for our shared consciousness, a beacon to guide us through the complexities ahead." Ethan reached out, his fingers brushing against the orb, and felt an immediate surge of connection, not just to Althea, but to something far greater. It was as if he could sense the intricate web of possibilities stretching out before them, each thread vibrating with potential. "I understand now," he said, his voice steady despite the enormity of what they were undertaking. "This isn't just about us anymore. We're forging a bridge, not just between human and Zytherian, but between ways of being that have never intersected before." Althea nodded, her bioluminescent markings glowing brighter in response to his words. "And yet, it begins with us. With this moment. With the choice to step forward together, knowing full well the risks and rewards." She took a step closer, her presence filling the space between them with a warmth that transcended physical touch. "Are you ready, Corporal Rain? To become more than yourself, to embrace a future that defies definition?" For a moment, Ethan hesitated, not out of doubt but out of awe. The weight of their decision pressed down on him, but beneath it lay a profound sense of purpose. He thought of all the battles he'd fought, all the sacrifices made in the name of peace and understanding, and realized that this was the ultimate extension of those efforts. A chance to redefine what it meant to connect, to transcend barriers that had once seemed insurmountable. "I'm ready," he said finally, his voice carrying a conviction that resonated through the chamber. "Not because I know exactly what lies ahead, but because I believe in the possibility of something greater. Something worth risking everything for." The orb between them flared brightly, casting the chamber in a cascade of colors that seemed to ripple through time itself. Althea smiled, her expression one of both relief and anticipation. "Then let us begin," she whispered, her hand finding his. As their fingers intertwined, the platform beneath them dissolved into pure energy, lifting them into a realm where past, present, and future converged. Around them, the crystalline walls shattered into fragments of light, revealing a vast expanse that defied comprehension. Stars wheeled and danced, timelines twisted and merged, and the very fabric of reality seemed to breathe with a life of its own. Ethan felt his consciousness expanding, stretching beyond the confines of his human identity to encompass perspectives he couldn't have imagined moments before. Yet amidst the chaos, one constant remained, the steady, unwavering presence of Althea beside him. Together, they stepped into the unknown, their union symbolizing not just the joining of two beings but the merging of worlds, dimensions, and possibilities. The journey ahead would be fraught with challenges, dangers, and discoveries that might reshape the universe itself. But for now, in this singular moment, they stood united, poised on the threshold of something extraordinary. As the light enveloped them completely, Ethan realized that their story was no longer just theirs alone. It had become a chapter in the ongoing narrative of existence, a testament to the power of connection and the boundless potential of love, to transcend boundaries, defy limitations, and illuminate even the darkest corners of the cosmos. And though the path forward remained uncertain, one truth shone brightly. Together, they had already begun to change everything.